What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing good. Welcome to my third episode. And if you noticed, I put the Aaron Abke shade here in my hair, new haircut. Thank you very much to my buddy Serge, who did that haircut. He's a perfect artist. And welcome to the Project Indigo, the Indigo Project. Today we are talking about prophecies. What is a prophecy? How can we see some pattern in our lives? And all the end time prophecies. I find it really interesting to talk about it right now because we have to ask ourselves the question, why should I focus on spirituality right now? Why should I do the mental work to ask myself, how can I be a better person? And we're going to go through some prophecies to answer that questions because there's pattern in time, there's patterns and there's cycles and there's prophecies, and we're going to try to make sense of all of that. So welcome to the Indigo Project. Before we go any further, we have to ask ourselves, what is a prophecy? Most people would say it's a prediction of the future, which is the simplest way of to describe it. Some people can go to see a medium and something happened and you're like, oh, the medium predicted it. That was a prophecy or something. And sometimes prophecies goes like through ages and they change a little bit or they stay the same, but we keep them from old time to now, and at the same time they never happened, but never know, maybe they will. And I would say there's two or three types of prophecies that we can see there. The problem with prophecies, the problem with predictions is like we know them before they happen. So somebody called the shot, said a prophecy, and we know it, and we try to either make a meaning out of it, or either we try to make them happen by manufacturing them. But also, there's prophecies that can be non-temporal. And I think this is where we will go with that video here. What is non-temporal in the prophecies? What will never die? What is going to be always true? And prophecies are super impressive because we don't understand how people can see in the future or predict things in the future. I went to Italy. I had the chance to work in Italy, and I went to Kuma, where one of the Sibyl, one of the oracle, was living in a grotto, in a cave, and that was pretty impressive. Now it's a touristic place where everybody can visit. But that was really impressive. I was leading a group. I was the first to walk in the cave. I was leading a group of travelers over there. And I was walking like a general, walking in that cave. And there was a more than real or a surreal feeling about that scene in my head. And I don't know, like the topic of today made me think about that. We can think about other, so the oracles, it's a best example for prophecies from the ancient time for sure. But there's also people like Nostradamus, Notre Dame, that had a lot of prophecies. People say that he saw the future, but it's all like written in encrypted quatrains, and it is so vague that we can connect them to any events today. Like this one. The sky will burn at 45 degrees. Fire approaches the great new city. By fire, he will destroy their city. A cold and cruel heart, blood will pour. And people would take that quatrains, and associated it with 9/11, which, like, it's so vague that you can associate that to any war. So a lot of interpretation is the kind of prophecy that, you know, can we be completely sure that it's a prophecy and that happened? It's the same thing with Baba Vanga in the 8th century, so it's really more modern time, who said also that she had predicted 9/11. Horror, horror. The American brothers will fall after being attacked by the steel bird, which is close still, huh? The wolf will be holding in a bush, and innocent blood will be gushing. So, steel birds, the American brothers or the twin sisters, it's super close, but still vague. The most popular prophecy that we know, it is the messianic fulfillment. It is a Jewish prophecy that a Messiah will come, and we're gonna go more in details in the Jewish prophecy later, but it is the Jewish Messiah, and then Jesus came and the Christians took Jesus as the Messiah. And what is bizarre in that prophecy is that Jesus came, but he was not the type of Messiah that people were waiting for. The Jewish people was waiting for a king, someone that's going to deliver Israel from um, the emperor, from and make their own country, their own kingship. And Israel, in that prophecy, Israel would be on kind of on top of the world. And Jesus didn't do that. He didn't even deliver Israel. The Christian took his presence as he saved people with his blood, with his crucifixion. He saved people, and now people's souls are free and they're going to the paradise. The problem that I have with messianic prophecy is that um, a lot of time we can know the prophecy before and act it. Even in the story of Jesus, Jesus knew completely that there was a prophecy that was telling that the Messiah would enter Jerusalem on a donkey. And still, Jesus decided to enter Jerusalem on a donkey. So, is that the prophecy fulfilled, or he decided to fulfill the prophecy to look like the Messiah? It's really a good question. So, there would be two types of prophecies: the one that are not really precise, and the one that are made up by the storyteller. Is there a prophecy that got realized completely, like that we are sure someone called it before and got realized? The answer is no, not really, except the one that has been made knowingly to make the prophecy happen. Now, putting the prophecies aside, just on a tangent, there are things in life that we can predict, like patterns. There's solar patterns, for an example. We know that the sun's gonna do the same pattern over and over again. There's a 11 years cycle that we're in right now. And the sun goes stronger and stronger, more activities, more solar sneeze, more solar eruptions, and then it calms down, and it goes up and down for 11 years. So we're at the top of the 11 years right now, 2025, 2026. It's the most, um, it's the it's the period that the in the cycle that the sun's going to be more active. I want to talk about one book that I read. It's called Synchronicity Keys from David Wilcock. He's claiming in the book that reality is not random. It goes with events that are connected in time through pattern, through cycle, and there's synchronicities in it. Synchronicities come from Carl Jung. It is those meaningful coincidence, and the synchronicities are hints or glitches in those cycles. And so in his book, there's some time loops, for an example, like in the macro and micro aspect of our life. I would say in our personal life, there's events that comes back, the same situations, the same people that comes back, and we have to. Have you ever noticed in your life that you kind of live the same events again, and you have to learn how to react to those events? And for David Wilcock in the book, if you listen to the synchronicities, to the coincidences that happen around those situations, you can learn from this situation. If you continue to act the same way over and over again, those patterns gonna repeat again. So you can kind of predict the kind of situation that's gonna happen in your life because you keep reliving the same pattern. And also on a macro, more kind of events, there's historical events that are kind of mirroring each other's. For example, he draw a lot of parallels between the falls of Rome and the fall of America. And it's the same type of people, the same type of events that brought the falls of um, different empires. It's super interesting. I don't want to go too much into that book, but I would encourage you to read it for sure. There's even events that are mirroring each other, and they're kind of a glitch in the matrix. He used the example of Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy, which those two assassinations were really similar, you know. Both one was in 1860, the other one was in 1960, so exactly 100 years apart. Both were assassinated. Both were shot in the head. Lincoln's secretary was named Kennedy. Kennedy's secretary was named Lincoln. Um, and both are succeeded by a man named Johnson. So a lot of coincidences or similitudes in both, even if it's 100 year apart, and they are completely 100 year apart. And there is, like I said, there's a link between the macro and the micro. What happens inside of you, we're gonna see it outside of us. He talks in his first book about studies that they looked at a lot of people meditating at the same time and the effect on reality, and they had some really interesting conclusion about that. So he talks in that book about what's going on inside of you is gonna what's going on inside of you is gonna shape the events. So if we all have a collective consciousness, everything that's happening inside of each of us would have an effect on the world's events. So if you listen to those synchronicities into those events, you draw the conclusion that consciousness shapes reality through belief, attentions, intentions, and synchronicities would show you if you're aligned, if you pay attention, and how can you have guidance in those situations through those cycles. It's a beautiful book. I will recommend either his first book, Source Code, or his second book, Synchronicity Keys, because it makes you see life differently for sure. But so, what if prophecies are not about predicting the future, but more about recognizing the pattern that are already unfolding, right? If reality moves in cycles, solar cycles, the moon cycles, the events, the empire cycles, etc., then maybe some people are not seeing the future, but they're more connected to see those cycles coming. And maybe that would explain why some mediums are right, you know? So that solar pattern that I was talking about, yeah, there's more sunspots, more solar flares, but it has an effect on first. There's more geomagnetic storm. So satellites, power grids, possible influence also on the climate. I don't want to go too far in that topic. The sun energy affect the earth for sure. The Also it affects our biology, our behavior. So, and he talks about those solar pattern in a way that most of the war they've been declared on the peak top of that solar activity of that 11 years cycle, and we can see it today with the war that's going on. It is a cycle that, you know, we can predict that every 11 years something big is going to happen because the sun is putting a lot of energy on the earth. So the solar cycle, we can see a lot of the period of unrest, wars, revolution. peaks and innovation and social change, inventions, while the solar potential is at its maximum, so at the top of that 11 years, which is 2025, 2026 this time. There's also another cycle that I want to talk about, and it's a really bigger cycle that it's kind of crazy because it's a cycle that now we can prove scientifically, but all the whole beliefs, all the even tribes, native tribe would have known about that cycle. They were talking about that cycle. And that cycle lasts about 26,000 years. It's called the procession of equinox. And like I said, every beliefs or even some native tribes they knew about that cycle, which is crazy because it's so big, 26,000 years. And this is where the background of the sky shift. So there's because the earth is inclined a little bit, is not straight up, is inclined, the way it rotates on itself and go around the sun, it's gonna wobble a little bit like this, and the sky will look different every night because of that. And every 26,000 years, that motion of wobble and the revolution comes back to the same exact spot that it was 26,000 years ago. So, how did we measure that, or how did even people with less technology measure that? So, that 26,000 year cycle, people decided to separate it in many ages: the age of Taurus, the age of Aries, the age of Pisces, the age of Aquarius. And for them, every age has its specificities. Every age lasts 2000 to 2000 or 2200 years, 2000 to 2200 years. And we can even have see the influence on those ages in the Bible. Like in the age of Taurus, we see a lot of bull. In the age of Aries, we see a lot of lamb. In the age of Pisces, we see a lot of fish. So we see that they were, even the people who wrote those things, those stories, those really old stories, they were aware of the symbolism in every ages. And we just switched to the age of Aquarius in between 2012 and 2020. So, and the Mayan calendar was about that too, the switch of the age. So we just switch, just that belief into the age would give us a hint that something is about to change if we believe in that. So if the solar cycles are like the heartbeat, every 11 years goes up and down, it pulses. Then the procession of the equinox will be the breathing of the cycle. It's slow, it's massive, and it's almost invisible, but it's always there like a clock that is turning. So maybe ancient prophecies weren't predicting specific events, but a transition into a new age, into a new cycles. So if we take that procession of the equinox and we see the Hinduism, they split it with other cycles. They still, and it doesn't go in conflict with the ages per se, but they split it in four cycles. Still in that axis of 26,000 years, they split it in four. You got, and they call it yugas. So you got the Satya Yuga, where it is the golden age of humanity. Everybody lives in peace. There's no diseases. There's no um, pain. The truth reign, harmony, enlightenment. Humans live in alignment with each other and with the divine principles. There's no sin, no corruption, no deceptions. Everything is perfect. And I think that if we relate to the story of Jesus, we can say that maybe Jesus was talking about that age. Was it a prophecy when he said the kingdom of my father will be on earth, or will, if anybody is aware of those yugas, is just part of that belief, right? But pure awareness, unity, clarity, etc. People don't even need to write things down at that point because our our brain or our capacity of thinking remembers everything. And then the second yuga is called the Treta Yuga. The ego appears. There's a split between our divinity and the ego, but it's still balanced. We still can manage to know that, the ego is there, but we should still make the right decisions. But we need still a structure, kings and government to kind of gauge our ego, to be sure that we follow the principles of God. Our divinity is still high, but it's no longer perfect because of that. Then there's the Dvapara Yuga. Knowledge grows, but so does conflict. We start to think that we have more knowledge, we're better than others. This is what our ego is telling us. And the spiritual awareness decrease because of that. We start to need to write everything down because we cannot. We're a little bit more stressed, a little bit less focused, and we need to write everything down to be sure we don't forget something. To be sure, also we can prove that we're better than the others. And this is how we descend slowly from the golden age to the Kali Yuga, which would be the age we are in right now. The truth becomes way harder to see in that age. Materialism dominates. Spiritual disconnection, conflicts rule the world everywhere. The human being cannot control himself. We lose knowledge. Even if we write everything down, we still lose a lot of knowledge. And people are dominated by their own writings. It's like the writings are more important than the logical sense at that point, and we can see it in our day-to-day life when judges cannot even judge with their own judgment, but they have to apply the law that is already written. And we see that throughout history as well, not just today. But this is the age we would be right now. And like a circle, we descend into that age. And the good news is that we're going back there. It's taking a lot of time, like thousands of years, but we're going back there. If we're at the bottom of the barrel, the good news is that we just can't get up. And this is a little bit when Jesus came and said that in every prophecies, they says that we're starting from corruptions and we're going back into a perfect world. So it kind of match with every prophecies that we have. And this is what we're going to do starting from now. We're going to look at some prophecies and we're going to pluck the details like we did for God and keep what is true, what is not temporal. And we're going to do that right now. So maybe the future is not completely unknown. Maybe it's just the next phase of a pattern that already happened. And in a lot of those beliefs, like the Hopi or the Hindu, there's a cataclysm that restart the civilization, like Noah's flood, for an example. And it restart us, it judges us, quote unquote, and restart the civilization, and we see it in every beliefs as well. What is really fascinating is that we can see it across really different culture. Those ideas are repeating. We can see it in Hinduism with the yugas, in astrology with all the ages, in Hopi, I hope I'm saying it right. Hopi tradition, humanity passes through different worlds: first world, second world, third world, and the balance is lost and we get it back. So it's all the same pattern that we can, at least if we pluck every details and every beliefs, we can say there's a beginning, a decline, an end, and a new beginning. People are fighting for details where I think this is the most important fact that we can group together, put together, say there's a cycle in every single one of them, and all of them has been written like a long time ago, a really long time ago. In the OP tradition, there's the first world, second world, third world, and the current fourth world. So there was many civilizations that lived that went through those tribulations and got a new birth, which is the new civilization. In each world, it ends due to an imbalance of corruption, and it is a story of Atlantis too. Like that grandiose civilization that got corrupted and died, and we would be the next civilization after them that tried to catch up. We see it in the five sons of Aztec, in the Norse mythology, in Chinese dynastic cycle, in Greek tradition. Really, everywhere we see that cycle of descent into corruption. Now, what the Bible says, and I want to be clear here: the Bible says what the Bible says is not what Jesus says. It's somebody called John, not even John the Apostle, but another John that some people say it's John the Apostle, but whatever. He saw a vision of what will happen in the future and said, "This is how the world would end." And first, the world falls into corruption. There's a moral decay, deception spreads, power structure become oppressive, and it set the stage for an imbalance before the collapse. And we can say it's now. We can say at the same time it's so not temporal because corruptions in governments and in kingship and in all the type of governance that we had, there was always corruption. So for the past 10,000 years, it's been happening. It's not something new. So we can say it's now for sure, but we can say that maybe the manifesting of the peace on earth is not temporal. It's not a moment. It is whenever we think it's going to be right to do the move. In the biblical end of the world, there's the rise of the beast. So a political power that bring a false authority. Um, the mark of the beast, the 666, become a symbol where people wear it on their arm and on their forehead to be able to buy, to sell, to live in this society. And just a little like note here that we hear a lot about like digital ID or even what we lived in COVID when people couldn't go in some restaurant or whatever. The people who made those laws, they're aware that they're saying that in the Bible. They're really aware that, you know. So again, is it a prophecy that got fulfilled or they made it happen? It, if one or the other, it's not really a prophecy, but it happened. The people who decided to restrict other people or digital ID didn't happen yet, but it like in England, it went really close to. They aware of that story of the Bible and they kind of make it happen. So tribulation starts, the wars, natural disasters, plagues. This is what happened in the Bible. Final confrontation at the end, God versus evil. It reaches its peak. The God win, good win, and the fall of the corrupted force happen, and there's a new heaven on earth. And this is not, like I said, this is not what Jesus was saying, but this is what John saw in a vision. And in every belief, this is a step that happens everywhere. There's a confrontation between good and evil. And for me, I see it more as good and evil inside of yourself. It is that confrontation that's going to lead us to create a new world. Is like the fight between our ego and the Holy Spirit inside of us, that demon and that angel that whisper. They're gonna fight and we're gonna good will prevail and we're gonna transform ourselves finally. What was Jesus saying about the coming of that new heaven on earth is even more beautiful because there's no tribulation. He didn't talk about tribulation. He didn't talk about all those problems. He's just talking about that the kingdom of my Father is within and we can reach it from within. And there's no temporal association at all. There's no time. It is whenever you're ready, it's going to happen. This is why people say that like Jesus is coming, but we don't know when. It is the Christ that is coming inside of us, and we make it happen instead of waiting on some world event. And if we are waiting for some world event to create the prophecy, we're at the great timing to talk about it right now because let's talk about the Jewish perspective on the end time. First, we can say that the Christian perspective on the end times, it's really inspired by the Jewish one. They're really close, and that's why, especially in Protestantism, evangelical Protestant, they believe in really the dominance of Israel to a certain point, because they put really the two end of the world story in one. So in the prophecy of the end time for the Jewish, they're waiting for a Messiah. Christian took Jesus as their Messiah, but the Jewish were like, no, it's not the king that we were waiting for. We're waiting for another Messiah that's going to be a human leader, so not divine, a descendant of King David. It's going to be hard to prove at that point, descendant of King David. And he's going to bring peace, justice, unity, and repair the world by installing some Jewish people, maybe at the government, maybe, but the land of Israel is going to be holier than the rest because God, there is Israel is their favorite people, and they're gonna be with God to rule the world. What does it take for the Messiah to happen? And this is where you see that it looks like a checklist before the Messiah arrives. So, first, the Jewish people return to Israel. Check. It's happening since 1945, 6. Because in the history of the Jewish people, there was so many exile and conquest that for the Messiah to come, the Jewish people should go back to the land of Israel to restore the process. And also, the land of Israel should be kind of like the land that got promised by God 4,000 years ago. So they say from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates. And we're seeing right now that the territory of Israel is kind of a changing for something bigger. So bigger land, Jewish people return to the land. Check. The messianic age now. So the Messiah will bring no more wall, knowledge and wisdom from the Torah, and humanity will live in harmony. Some Jewish texts would mention a final conflict before peace, Gog and Magog, a war, symbolic or literal. It depends on the interpretation, but something will happen where two-thirds of the world will die before the Messiah comes. But it's not the main focus of their story, though. So in this vision, the world doesn't end. The world is transformed. We still live on the planet, and the world is transformed for a better world, which is the goal of, I hope, everybody that is listening here. Like, we want to create peace, right? So there's some criteria for the Messiah to come back, and he must come from the line of King David, which I said it would be really hard to prove. He will bring peace to the world. He will gather back the people of Israel and even rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And this is kind of interesting because the temple now, there's a mosque that is there. It's one of the most holy sites for a Muslim, for Islam. And that mosque, one of the most important in the world, would have to be destroyed for the temple to be rebuilt. So that is not done yet. The prophecy is still not fulfilled. But if that must get destroyed, I hope we're gonna see it coming. The thing that made me believe that that prophecy is kind of being enacted right now, is being created right now, is the fact that to build the next temple, they have to sacrifice, because Judaism is a lot about sacrificing. They have to sacrifice a red reifer, a red cow, in front of or at that place, at that holy place, to they sacrificed a red cow to inaugurate the new sites. The thing is, like, there was no red cow for millennium over there. It's not a thing, and so we can see it as a prophecy. When the red cow is gonna appear, it's gonna be the good time. But the fact is, since 2022, United States are sending red cows over there to breed them, to make it perfect, because there's some criteria about sacrificing that red cow. But that made me think that maybe they're doing it. Maybe there are acting their prophecies and they want to usher the Messiah. And there's some rumors in politics. I promised myself not to talk about politics, but there's some rumors in the United States that this is what they're doing, allegedly. In that story, all the world should kind of hate Israel. Um, at the end of the day, the whole world is kind of against Israel. And I'm not saying that they're doing that on purpose, but the best way that people would hate you is like to start wars everywhere. So this is where I'm gonna ask the question again. We take the checklist, okay? People going back to Israel. Check, it's happening. We need a red cow to sacrifice. Oh, check, we imported some. We need everybody, the whole world, to hate Israel. Oh, let's start some more. Check. So this is where I ask the question again. It is really the fulfillment when it's organized by the person who believe in that prophecies, right? And the red cow thing, the red reefer, when they started to import them in 2022, we can see that there's a will for them to be prepared for that at least, because it's not a vague prediction. When we know the prophecy before, we can make it happen. What is interesting is, like, from some writing the Messiah will be decided after that, but from some other writings the Messiah will build the temple, so it's going to be decided before that. So let's see how things unfold, if ever it unfold, right? But when you look at all those traditions, the return of the Messiah, the age of yugas, the Father's kingdom from Jesus, they look like they're pointing on the same directions. Not necessarily to just one single event, but more a transformation. This is what I see in all those beliefs. Some say it comes from outside, a Messiah or a world event, a figure, a moment, a shift in the world. But other would suggest differently, that the kingdom was never meant to arrive to us. It was meant to be revealed from inside. This is what was Jesus was saying. There's not a lot of quote from Jesus. There's not a lot. We put more importance on his story than on his quote. But he said that the kingdom of my Father will be really from inside. And maybe that's where it becomes more personal, because the idea of the Christ is not only a historical figure, but it's something that exists right inside of us. So whether you call it the Messiah or the Golden Age or the New World or heaven on earth, maybe what all of these traditions are pointing to is not just something that happens to us, but something that happens through us. Maybe the question is not when will the Messiah come, but what part of us is ready to receive it? Maybe the golden age doesn't begin when the world changes, but when we do inside of us. If there is a kingdom, it might not be somewhere else than inside of us. It might be something we learn to see instead, and something we learn to build all together. This is why I'm saying that more we're going to wait, and more we're going to wait. We're waiting for some change that we are the people who are supposed to make. Right now, everything seems to be pointing in just one direction, not toward fear, but toward love and curiosity, not toward collapse, but toward expansion, not toward waiting, but towards becoming. And this is why I think right now that it's important to have those discussions and ask ourselves, how can we usher a new world in peace? Thank you very much. This is the end for today. I hope you liked it. It's a little bit different than usually. And I would ask you to subscribe and to comment if you love my content. I will try to answer. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Namaste.